Perfect. Okay, so guys, let's do a quick little review and preview. So in the previous lesson, the lesson was all about moving from lists of data to grouped data. And so when you see grouped data, it generally comes in this sort of table where you have either an interval or an exact grouping of data and then a frequency column. And what we worked on was finding things like the estimated mean and the modal interval, and also the median interval. So it's almost like when we deal with group data, we have similar things that we've done before, but we're just kind of adapting them. Now, I just want to check what were the columns that we added sometimes to help us work out this estimated mean and the median interval, and sometimes the modal interval. What were the extra columns that we sometimes added? So I see Kevin says the midpoint. Kevin, I agree with you. The midpoint of an interval of data can be very helpful. So that would be one column. And cumulative frequency was the other column. Exactly. Now, I want to check which, let's just give these little numbers like 1, 2, and 3. What of the three numbers, which column was the midpoint? So midpoint column, if we added that, which of the three did it help us calculate? Was it number 1, the estimated mean? Was it number 2, the modal interval? Or was it 3, the median interval? Okay, so what was the midpoint helpful in calculating? The mid, like 5, then 15, 25, 35, and so on. Okay, so clearly it helped me work out the estimated mean. Fantastic. Now, what was the cumulative frequency table of the three? Which one was that quite helpful at helping us work out of the three? So if we went and did the cumulative frequency table, cumulative frequency would be 1 for the first row, then it would be 3, then it would be 14, and it would carry on. Okay, so what are the answers I see in the chat? The cumulative frequency table helps us figure out where the median interval is. We also have to do a little bit of a calculation to figure out the position of the median. But once we know its position, we look at the cumulative frequency to help us find the median interval. And then which of the three is the frequency column helpful for? Which of the three does the frequency column help us identify? Yeah, it helps us find the modal interval. Absolutely. Okay, so that is a little recap of the last lesson. And also remember that in the scenario, we're getting median intervals and modal intervals, and then the estimated mean is an exact number, but it's an estimate because we're using the midpoints of the intervals to stand in for data. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to teach you how to find the estimated mean using your calculator. And we're going to watch a video first, completely through, I'll stop a little bit along the way and watch it once, and then I'll go through the key points again. So it'll probably take about 3 to 4 minutes, and then we'll know how to do it using our calculator. In the previous lesson, I showed you how to do it manually. Okay, so let's do this.
In this video, we're going to look at how to use your Casio calculator to work out the mean for a group frequency table such as this, where we've got age 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and 20 to 40. And we've got the frequencies 5, 4, and 11. So first of all, we're going to get our Casio calculator. I'm using the FX991ES, but it can be any modern Casio. And first of all, we're going to need to go into setup. So we're going to press Shift and Setup.
Okay, so very first step is to hit Shift and Setup. Okay, Shift and Setup. And the next thing he's going to do is he's going to hit the down arrow on this keypad.
Is we want our table to have a frequency column. So we've got some options here. We're going to press down. And
okay, so again, why is he doing this? He's turning the frequency column on because obviously when we deal with group data, we have a frequency column. So when he clicked the down arrow, he then suggests selecting 4 for stat, but on some calculators, sometimes you need to select 3, but basically you should be selecting that. And when you do it,
you can see the word stat. So you press that and it says frequency on or off. We want to turn the frequency on.
Okay, so he clicked 1 to turn the frequency column on.
Now we're going to need to change our calculator into statistics mode. You can see the statistics button here hasn't been selected. So we press mode.
So now he's going into the mode, statistics mode. So we're going to go mode 2 on most of your calculators to go to statistics mode.
And then statistics is number 3.
Oh, sorry, it's 3 on his calculator. Sometimes it's 2.
Options, and we choose number 1 for the 1 minus var. Now,
and so then what you have is you have a data column, which is going to be midpoints, and then you have an extra column for frequency. Okay, I'm going to let him play through this next bit.
Columns, we've got the first one, which is X, and the second one, which is frequency. Now we do need to work out our midpoints ourselves, okay? So for the first category, our midpoint would be 5. For the second category, it would be 15. And for the third one, it's going to be 30. So let's input those. So 5 equals 15 equals and 30 equals. It's automatically changed all our frequencies to 1, 1, and 1. We're going to need to change those to 5, 4, and 11. So 5, 4, and 11. And what we're going to now do is we're going to press.
Okay, so once you've entered your data, just like before, you're just going to hit AC, and that clears everything away, but it's saved there. And then we're going to go Shift 1, which takes us back into stat mode, which he'll do in a moment.
C button. Don't worry, this data has been stored. So we press AC, and then we want this stats mode on the calculator here. So we're going to press Shift and then Stat. I've got some options. Again, we choose number 4, and we want the mean. So the mean is number 2, which is the X bar. So number 2 equals, and we've been given our mean, which is 20.75. So
okay, so what I'm going to do is there's one key step that you have to do, and that's turn the frequency column on. So once you've go ahead now, and let's just make sure you know how to turn the frequency column on. Once you've done it, just type an F in the chat.
To use your Casio calculator to work out the mean for group frequency tables.
I'm going to turn him off, and I'll just show you that step where he's. And once you've turned your frequency column on, just give me an F in the chat. Okay, now, once you've done that, I want you to start entering the data that he had. I'll bring it up for you now. Oh, where did I put it? It's on the side here. Do I have it? I don't. Okay, let me just, there it is. So the data set is basically you're going to put 5, 15, 30 as your midpoints. Let me try and take a little screenshot. And I will put the data set here. There we go. And I want you to try and enter the data into your calculator and try and get the value that he got at the end. Now, I know there's a lot going on the screen, and so I do want you to raise your hand or ask a question, but basically, we're trying to check if we can get our calculators to do the same. If there are questions, I want you to raise your hand or put them in the chat. Okay, so Kevin has asked, can we repeat? Kevin, do you want me to repeat the frequency turning on, or do you want me to repeat the entering the data? So both, please. Okay, so let's just go back to the video again, and let's just look at the steps one more time. Okay, so he gives us a data set. That's not exciting. We want to work it out. So step one is we go shift, setup, and now we have to hit the down arrow. Okay, so the down arrow. And in the down arrow, we select stat. Now, on his calculator, he selects 4. You may be selecting something else. Okay. Now, once you select that stat, you get the choice to turn a frequency column on or off. So I would say select 1 for on, because you want a frequency column to do this calculation on your calculator. Now, once you've done that, you won't know if it's on until you put it into stat mode. So now we go mode, and then we select stats. Younger, yes, we're calculating the estimated mean for a grouped frequency table. And then we're going to select 4. Sorry, you would select whatever the stat thing 2, and then 1 for variance, and you should get 2 columns in your data set. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to place the midpoints of our age. So for this data set, our data set is going to be 5, 15, 30, and the frequency would be 541. And once we've done that, we would then call up in fact, I'll put the steps. Once you've turned the frequency thing on, these are the steps you follow. So let me bring this down for a second. And once you've turned the frequency column on, basically you go setup, stat, and then var, and then you're going to enter your data. First the midpoints, then the frequencies. And then after you've entered your data, you click AC, shift stat 1, 4 for var, and then 2 to choose the mean. And once you've done that, I want you to put in the chat what you are getting for your estimated mean. Okay, so I want to see, because I want you to do this calculation, and then I want you to put it in the chat so we can compare what our estimated means are. Now, we'll get the same answer if we do it the manual way. The manual way would be to say estimated mean is divided by 5, 4, so it's 9, so 20. And then I would just do it like 5 times 5 plus 15 times 4 plus, what is the 30 times 11. But on big data sets, your calculator can be helpful. And so that's why I want to make sure you've got this technique down. Okay. So I'm seeing 20.75, which is the correct answer that I was looking for. I'm going to give you another chance to practice this now. So if you feel a bit unsure, don't stress. You'll get another round of practice in a moment. And we're trying to calculate the estimated mean using our calculators. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we are going to try and calculate the estimated mean using our calculator for this one. I'm going to bring my calculator steps down as well. So these are the steps you need, but you need to turn the frequency column on first. Calculate me the estimated mean for this data table using your calculator. Off we go. So remember, you need to turn the frequency column on. And then once you've got your answer, I want you to put that in the chat. So that would be your first bit of steps. This would be your second step, other than putting data in and going equals, equals, and then throughout.
Mr. Ace?
Yeah. See
Can
how?
you take the question?
Awesome. Thanks, Lebo. Hi,
Hi,
Sihao.
sir.
Yes.
So
I want to ask if would it be incorrect to press AC and add the new data, or do I have to start the process like from the beginning?
Okay, good question, Sihao. So what I would normally do is, look, you can change the data. You would have to just go over the old data. So that's fine. Or you could just go out of stat mode and then come back in again. If you leave stat mode and come back in, it clears it. However, you could also just replace the data. That would also work. So the other question was, how do you find the midpoints? To find the midpoint of an interval, you just add the two endpoints and divide by 2. So 0 plus 10 divided by 2 is 5. 10 plus 20 divided by 2 is 15. And so you would just do it like that. And those are the points that you're putting in your calculator. So you'll put 5, 15, 25, 35, 45. These would be the midpoints. And then the frequency column like that. So watch out, Kevin. I think you may have added an extra data point or made a little error there, because the answer is 25.67. So I'm going to do one more practice round for this. And for this round, you should have got 25.67. If you feel like you're still getting there, remember you can rewatch this video. Okay. So let's do one more. So here is the frequency data table, and you can imagine, let's just see if you can get the estimated mean for this data set. So Dawn, in the second example, can I ask you to clear your data by going out of stat mode into computation mode, back into stat, and then see that your data is blank. And now in this next part, when you're entering the data, obviously your midpoints would be 5, 15, 25, 35. And make sure you've got the correct data, and then go from there. I'll also bring the instructions down so you can see them again. So let's do that. Okay, so see what you guys get for your answer for this grouped data table. So Sarah's asking, or is it just AC shift? Let's have a look. So do we press anything before the AC? So, okay, so when you go into entering your data, Sarah, after everything, you go 5 equals, 15 equals, 25 equals. Whenever you're entering data, you always press the equal sign for it to enter. But then you hit AC to basically leave the data entering screen. And then you start the shift stat 1, which basically gets you into the sort of the choosing of a statistic. And then you choose 4 for variance and then 2 for the mean. So you should be getting 35.44 as your correct answer. Okay, so 35.44. And remember, some questions require you to calculate the estimated mean manually. But if they just give you a table, obviously the calculator can go quite quickly. And so it's a handy skill to know how to do. Just like figuring out the standard deviation on a calculator is also a handy skill to have. If you want to turn the frequency, Kadlejo, is the last one 60 or 65? It's 65. Sorry, Kadlejo, that was me being silly. This should be 65. Thank you very much for pointing that out. And you should get 35.4, essentially. Okay. So I'm going to move on from this, but I think that it seems like most of you have got it now, or you'll get it through rewatching the video. So let's move on to graphs of grouped data tables. And the most common, or one of the most common graphs of grouped data is a histogram. And what a histogram does is it shows the intervals along the bottom, along the x-axis, and then it shows the frequency on the vertical axis. And so what I want is I want you guys to answer this question about this histogram. And what it does, the histogram, the story is, a class carried out an experiment to measure the length of cuckoo eggs. The length of each egg was measured to the nearest millimeter. The results are shown in the following histogram. So basically what this is saying, column 1 says there was one egg that was between 19 and 20. Looks like one egg. There were 8 eggs that were between 20 and 21. And so I want you to know, I want to know how many eggs were measured altogether in the experiment. How would you work that out? Or what is it? Is it A, B, C, or D? Yeah. So what's interesting about a histogram is that if you want to know the total number of eggs measured, you would just get the cumulative frequency, right? You would add up the first interval, so 1 plus 8 plus 17 plus 40. I couldn't see exactly what the numbers were, but basically you should get pretty close to 100. And so the correct answer will be D. Now, I want to ask you another question. If I had to ask you what is the estimated mean of this data set, could you work out the estimated mean of this histogram? How would we do that? Maybe somebody can share. What do you think we need to do to work out the estimate? We'll use our calculators, but how would we get the estimated mean here? Who has an idea? I'm like taking it up a notch now. So what did we normally need for an estimated mean? We needed a column with midpoints, and we needed a column with frequencies, didn't we? Yes. So we needed our midpoints of our intervals, and we needed a frequency. So in this particular histogram, the first interval midpoint is 19.5. The second interval midpoint is 20.5, then 21.5, and then it's 22.5, 23.5, and then 24.5. Right? So those are the midpoints of the intervals. You can see them kind of over here. Now, let's just agree, I haven't, on the frequencies are just going to be 1, 8, 17, 40, 26, and 8. So if I gave you that table, could you guys work out the estimated mean for me now using your calculator? Think about how we would do that. So I think you can basically use exactly the same logic that you did in the previous question. Yeah, look how fast you guys. Whoa. Yo, I was still. So obviously the calculators are helpful, clearly. Okay. Right, so we can get the estimated mean quite quickly, and you're going to see the estimated mean for this histogram is 22.56. So histograms are just another way of showing data from a table. The other thing about a histogram is that also there'll never be gaps between the data. The data will always be, there'll be no gaps. Now I want to ask you another question. What is the modal interval for this data set? What is the modal interval for this data set? What's the modal interval for this data set? Okay, so remember it's an interval, hey? Modal interval. It's not one number, it's an interval. Which is the modal interval for this data set? So it's going to be the one that occurs the most often, so the red one. And which number is that between? It's between 22 and 23. So that would be the modal interval. Now, I'm not going to go into the median interval right now, but you can imagine how we would do this. We would say, well, how many items are there in total? And we'd say 100 items included. And then let's find the position of this thing. And then we would just count until we got to the interval that was in the correct position. Okay. Let's do another question on histograms. Let's do this one. Now, the story is, but let's not do this one. Let's do this one. Jim measured the daily rainfall at the same spot in his garden for each day of the year, 365 days. He recorded his results to the nearest millimeter. The results are shown in the following histogram. So this is rainfall of a certain, like the number of days is the vertical and the amount of rainfall is the horizontal. On approximately how many days was the rainfall less than 10 millimeters? Now remember, rainfall is shown on the bottom here. So which of the four do you think it is? I'll give you a moment to figure that out. The rainfall was less than 10 millimeters. Okay, so Dawn has an option. Who else has a guess? Who else has an idea? So what is this saying? It's saying rainfall between 0 and 5 was probably about 135 days of the year. Between 5 and 10 was probably around 80. Between 10 and 15 was around 70, I guess. Now, which intervals are we interested? We're interested in the intervals where the rainfall was less than 10 millimeters. So less than 10 millimeters, that would be these intervals over here. So which of the options is it going to be? I think my count over here was probably a bit off. It probably is more like is it like 140, 130, something around there. No, we'll go with like 136 just to be. So less than 10 millimeters is just going to be these two. And if you add 136 plus 80, you should get 216. And so that would be the correct interval. Or sorry, the correct answer. So guys, after the break, so we were doing questions on histograms now. And what you can see is a histogram is really just a simple visual way of showing the table that we were getting familiar with before. And we can work out pretty much everything you could work out in a table, we could work out for a histogram. Now, after the break, I'm going to ask you to draw a histogram. And I'm also going to ask you to draw something called a frequency polygon, which is basically a histogram just like disguised, basically. Okay, but before we get to that, I want everyone to turn on their cameras and I want them to stand up and stretch. And Lebo, please make sure that our students are being suitably encouraged to stretch. We know it will benefit them in the long run. So on your feet, everyone, and I'm going to turn on the lights because ESCOM is being good to me. Yay, let there be lights, and there was. Okay, turn on those cameras. I want to see you stretching.
Give your brain a break.
I have load shedding. Oh, flip. Okay, Rachel, you're excused for today. Yeah. But we want to see those people who are not load shedding stretch it out, guys. angles. Let's go.
Anybody out there?
Don't do it. Don't let us have all the fun by stretching. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think they're camera shy today, so it's fine.
Oh. Okay. Well, give me a thumbs up in the chat if you have had a good stretch. I want to see, because I load shedding for the past few days. Okay. Awesome. I need to teach you guys good habits. Stretching is a big thing. Quick brain break for today. The first pieces of the space shuttle launched in 19-something. This puzzle will help you figure that out. Off you go. Shuttle is 9. See how? I think I agree. Because I know my times tables. 9 times 9 is 81. So we have all those. And I think I agree with Sahau that an astronaut by himself must be 50, because 9 plus 50 is 59. Loretta agrees. So now we have one little space person, another little space person is 50 and 50. So what is these hammers? The hammers, the tool is 100, or together it's 100, which means the tools, Shane agrees, the tools are 80. So what is the final answer going to be? Rachel or Atile, they have an answer. Who agrees? So 80 plus 9 plus 9, to me, is going to be 98, which the first piece of the space shuttle launched in 1998. Look at that. You learn something new every day. So that, I assume that's the current space station that is still in operation. So it's been up there for 24 years, or at least the first part has been. Awesome. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. That was kind of a funky one today. And Lacona agrees. And Keenan says the 20th centuries. Maybe, yes, it was. It was in the 20th century. Okay, let's do a little bit of histogram drawing. So I'm going to give you the following table, and I want you to draw me a histogram. And what are the important steps? Well, you have to have the horizontal and vertical axis. So I want you to draw and label them. Then I want you to represent frequency on the vertical axis and classes on the horizontal. And then use the frequencies as the heights and draw vertical, I would say horizontal bars for each class. Not vertical, but. So I want you to draw me a histogram for this set of data. And what you should have is a horizontal axis. Oh, excuse my writing, and a vertical axis. And I want you to draw me a histogram. So off we go. Histogram is like the nicest graph to draw ever. I just make little increments. So what do I have? I've got, it goes up to 11 is the highest for frequency. So yeah, go like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And the intervals are in tens. Maybe I'll just do it like this. Now, when you're done drawing your histogram, just click or just put done in the chat, so I know that you've done your histogram. Yep, Rachel, I'm telling you the truth. Indeed, it was. It was 1998. So Keenan raises a good question. A bar graph is often confused with histograms, but so a bar graph will have spaces between the bars, where a histogram will have the bars right next to each other. There are some other differences, but for our purposes now, that's the main thing to look out for difference. let's say I would just draw 0, 10. Now, you can use whatever scale works for you as long as you've got the numbers, but the very first one from 10 to 20 is in line with 2. So the very first one should look a bit like that. And the second one goes up to 4, which means it looks like that. I should also have this and then percentage. Okay, so let's get those histograms done. What's the rest of the histogram going to look like? Seven. So your histogram now should have a frequency. I'm using F because of limited space, but a frequency on the vertical axis, and then on the horizontal axis, you should just have percentage intervals. Should there be a gap between the first bar? Okay, so Dawn, I just started my scale at 0, and that's why I left there's a gap. It depends, histogram, you didn't have to have that first interval there, but it's not wrong to have it. And it's quite advantageous for drawing a frequency polygon. But the honest truth is you could have started your scale at 10 or at 0. It wouldn't have mattered. Okay. For those students who have a little bit of time on their hands, why don't you calculate me the estimated mean for this data set? So I'm not going to make this a compulsory thing. It's just that if you're done early with your histogram, why don't you calculate the estimated mean while you have a bit of time left, while we wait for other students to click done in the chat. So you must, when you're done with the histogram, click done or put done in the chat. Just so I can see how it's going. Okay. Cool. So your histogram should be looking, oh, let me get rid of that. Something like this pre-prepared answer. So let's have a look at that. Your histogram should be looking something like, right? You have percentages on the bottom. They've used the label number of learners, which is not wrong, but generally you would also have an F for frequency or frequency. And on your axis, can't you write the intervals as they are intended to say, 10, 20, etc.? You can do that, yes. So it's not wrong to go, for example, here, 10, 20, 30, and so on. You don't have to put, this takes a lot longer to write the way they've done it in this answer. Okay. So look, histograms are not the most difficult thing to draw in the world. And so as long as you've just done one and you understand the basics of it, I'm happy. Okay, so just, I want to get a sense from the class, do you feel comfortable drawing a histogram? Thumbs up, yes. Thumbs down, no. It's just a straight plot of the intervals on the horizontal and then the frequency on the vertical. Okay, that's kind of what I was thinking. Now, there is another graph that you need to know how to draw, and that is called a frequency polygon. Okay, does anybody know how a frequency polygon is connected to a histogram? I'd love to hear your voice or a comment from you, or even just a comment in the chat. How are a frequency polygon and a histogram related. Because a frequency polygon is very easy to draw if you've got a histogram. Okay, Rachel and Dawn, they're saying the midpoints are important. You're quite right. To draw a frequency polygon, you just get midpoints of each of the intervals. So you go to the midpoints of each of the intervals, and there's one other thing that you do. You add an extra interval at the end and an extra interval at the beginning. And the reason this needs to be done is so that the frequency polygon can get back down to 0. So you put the dots in the middle of each histogram, and then you add an extra interval on each side, and then it's a polygon, which means it has straight edges. So you find the dot in the middle of each of the end ones, and you join each dot with a straight line. Now, it's quite hard for me to draw a straight line digitally, but the basic idea is that a frequency polygon would look like that, and it ends back down at 0. And so you need to add this extra interval on each side so that you can get back down to 0. Okay, so yeah, so it's a little bit like it, but I'm not going to go to ogives today, Kevin. That's the next lesson. Okay, so good news is if you've got a histogram, frequency polygons are really easy. Frequency polygons basically just like the midpoints of histograms with the extra intervals. So
Mr. Ace?
there's a good question. Rachel said, if there wasn't one on interval 10 to 20, would you still add an extra or use that? That is a good question. Because you got back to the ground, look, you know what, Rachel, to be consistent, you probably would add the extra one, but it's one of those things where I think both would be correct if I think about the definition, because it's a polygon. And that's all you wanted to see. Okay. What was the question level?
Sorry, Mr. Ace, there was a question coming from Shengui.
Okay. Do you want to unmute and we can go from there?
Okay.
While I take this question, guys, I want you to draw another histogram for this data set. And what I want you to do is I also want you to draw a frequency polygon over your histogram. Does that make sense? So you're drawing a histogram from this data set. So you have your vertical axis, you have your horizontal axis. You mark off stuff, and you draw your bars. Then I want you to draw a frequency polygon over that just to test you've got it. Okay, what was the student asking a question? Let's go to you.
She didn't unmute, so I just asked if she can type it in the chat instead.
Okay, cool. Well, then everyone else, we are working out and drawing a histogram to represent this data set, and then drawing a frequency polygon over that.
Oh, her question was, how do you calculate the estimated mean?
Aha. Can I suggest watching the recording, you'll see the very first 15 minutes or so we spent around doing that. And that will be how to do it with your calculator. If you want to know how to do the estimated mean manually, we did that at the end of the lesson before today's one. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Ace.
Cool. And then once you've done your histogram, just click done in the chat. Okay, so what should we be doing? We start with our axes. So we know we're going to have, actually, let me make a bit more space. So we have our vertical and our horizontal axes. And then we would just make markings that are appropriate. Now I would just choose a scale so that you can fit your data in, and the same thing here. Okay, so guys, I'm not going to draw it from scratch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the pre-made histogram so that you give a sense of what it should look like. And again, something else that I haven't been emphasizing, but generally with a histogram, although generally marks are not taken off for this, you also like to see a bit of a title describing what the story is about. And then on the bottom here, it's also fine to have 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. You don't have to put it exactly like this. There's two different ways of annotating the horizontal axis. So this is our histogram. How would we draw a frequency polygon? Well, we'd need to add an extra interval on each side. So this would be going down to 5 now, and it would be going up to 45 up here. And then we would have our midpoints at each of these intervals. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to put midpoints on each of these bars, and I'm going to connect them with straight lines. Sorry, this looks a bit curvy, but straight lines, and straight lines. And so those straight lines will give you a frequency polygon. Main thing about a frequency polygon is to know that the middle of the interval is important. Oh, now people are getting very snazzy. So Lisa has said that the histogram is positively skewed. Now, Lisa, you're absolutely correct. This is positively skewed because you can see this sort of the distribution going off to the right here. It's almost like this tail is going. But I'll talk a little more about that in future lessons. But you're right, this histogram is positively skewed because of the sort of like, you can see how the data is spread out more to the right, then it's closer together on the left, further apart on the right. Okay, now, it is possible to draw in fact, let's just do a quick vote. Thumbs up if you understand how to draw a frequency polygon. Thumbs down if you feel a bit rushed and are unsure about how to draw a frequency polygon. Okay. Now, sometimes in an exam, they don't just give you a histogram to draw, then a frequency polygon. Sometimes you need to go straight to calculating the frequency polygon coordinates and drawing it. Okay, so what would be, if I didn't have a histogram, if I was needing to go straight to a frequency polygon, what are the most important things that I need to do? Well, I think I would need to add intervals would be the one thing. So I'd add the intervals at the top and bottom, or beginning and end. And then I would also find the midpoints. And then third step would be to connect the midpoints with straight lines. So what we're going to do to finish today is I'm just going to show you how it's possible to generate the coordinates for a frequency polygon when all you're given is the original table. So instead of going histogram and then a frequency polygon, we are going to go straight to a frequency polygon. So what would that look like? Okay, so here is a question. It says here, all I want you to do, I'm not even going to draw it, we're just going to generate the points for today, is I'm going to add an extra column for point. And this is going to be the point on the frequency polygon. Now I need to, before I even do that, let me add my extra categories. I'm going to have a category that goes from -5 to 0. And I'm also going to have a category that goes from 30 to 35. And all that is me adding the extra intervals at the beginning and the end. Now we know that the intervals at the beginning and the end are going to go back down to 0. So they're going to have a 0 here and a 0 here. In fact, guys, we're running out of time, so we'll actually start this at the beginning of the next lesson, but I'm just going to show you for 2 minutes how you would do this. Okay, so what is my goal of doing this? I want to be able to draw a frequency polygon. In order to draw it without a histogram, I need points. And so how am I going to get my points? Well, the point that I need is going to have, as its x coordinate, it is going to be the midpoint of an interval. And as the y coordinate, it is going to be the frequency. And so I'll give you an example here. If I look at this category 0 to 5, where is the midpoint? It's going to be 2.5. Oh, my pen is being a bit funny. So midpoint would be 2.5. That's the wrong column. So between here, let's go to the -2.5 for here, 2.5 for here, 7.5, 12.5, and you can see what I'm doing. What is going to be the point on the frequency polygon? All I'm going to do is I'm going to say the x point is just the midpoint. So it would be -2.5 and then 0. So that would be my first point. Then the second one would be 2.5 and 12. The third one would just be 7.5 and 29. And so we would go through our table making a list of points, and then those points would be plotted on this graphing axis, and we would then just go about joining them with a straight line. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the next lesson with this question, because I think that we've done so much tonight, it's a little bit too much to squeeze in, but I like the idea of just showing you guys now. So the easiest way to draw a frequency polygon is to just use the histogram. But if you are given a table, what you need really is extra intervals on each side, and then to find the midpoints, and then make a point in an extra column. Okay. Yes, Lisa, these are called ordered pairs at the end. All right, guys, so that is today's lesson. We're going to wrap it up from there. We will restart this in the next lesson.